use a trim tool or a screwdriver, but I like to use the trim tool. That way I can just go like that. So that's what that tag does. That pin goes down in. If you have a clip like this, I use this kind of body tool, and then you just grab both sides, squeeze, and you can pull the tag right up. So first thing we're going to do, 10mm wrench, disconnect the negative terminal side of the battery. Set it aside, make sure it doesn't pop back up and ground out. Don't forget to drain your coolant, or if you spill some, make sure you top it off and get all the air bubbles out of the system before you run it. Now with a pair of pliers, we're just going to remove our hose clamps on the two hoses connected to the radiator overflow tank. Just give a pull. If they're stuck on there, I like to bring it to the second notch and loosely grab it and pull. Being careful not to puncture the rubber with the pliers. Now we need a socket for a 10mm socket for 1 and 2 mounting bolts. There's one. Second one. And you lift your tank right up. Remove the right front tire, 21mm socket. We're going to remove the inner fender shield right by the drive belt area. I'm going to use a body tool and just like to pop these clips right out. Down below 2. Continue taking down your shields from underneath. So to loosen the Serp belt, it comes with a hectagon shaped for a 19mm socket on the tensioner. So you're going to put a 19mm socket on there, and you're going to pull down and compress the shock and take the belt off. I'm going to disconnect it from the water pump. It's the easiest one because it's a smooth tensioner. A smooth pulley, shall I say. Come right out. So with a floor jack and a piece of wood on it, so you don't dent your oil pan, you just want to support the engine enough so when you undo the motor mount, it won't drop. I'm going to take this ground strap out of the way. And then I've got 2 mounting bolts here, 17mm socket. And then I have 3 mounting points, 1, 2, and 3 for this motor mount. Take this strap off with a body clip tool. You can just remove this real quick. Now we can disconnect the crank sensor connector. And the bracket that holds that there is a 10mm socket. Then you'll follow the line straight down the water pump and remove the bolts that mount it. 10mm socket, remove this bracket. I like to put the bolt right back in so that way I don't lose it. And a 10mm socket to remove the power cord from the battery. Remember, your negative cable should be disconnected at this point. And then we're going to take the regulator connector off, and the squeeze tab on this looks like it's right here. So now we can move that aside And we're going to take off the 2 mounting bolts for the alternator. 14 millimeter for the long one, 14 millimeter socket. And then the other one is mounted right down here. And that is going to be a 12 millimeter socket. I ended up with a swivel 12 millimeter with extension. There we go. We can remove that top bolt. Now try to get the harness completely out of the way. See if you can lift this alternator right up. So now we can see the whole harness for that crank sensor. It goes right down around the water pump. I'm going to pull that off there. And then you're going to go down below to get at that mounting bolt. So from here we can see the crank sensor harness going down into the block. It attaches to the water pump. Usually this factory has a clip that goes in there, but you can see someone else has been in here. So they used a wire tie. I'm just going to cut that free. And then a 10 millimeter wrench, and I'm going to take that bolt out. So let's see if it moves. We can just spin it like that. If you have problems, if it's frozen in there, you can use a little flathead screwdriver to pry in there. You don't want to break it off because you want it to come out somewhat even. So just wedge a little bit in there like that. Because this has a seal on it, a rubber O-ring, so it's going to act like a suction. Equal amounts of pressure. There we go. Make sure your surface is nice and clean. And we're going to reinstall. I might put a little bit of clean oil on this O-ring so it makes a nice little seal. Line it up. See if you can push it down. Line that bolt hole up, and then we'll put the bolt in. So once it bottoms out, I'm just going to snug it. I don't want to over tighten it. I don't want to break that plastic, but I want to make sure that it's tight. Clip that comes with a new one right into the water pump slot. Okay. Now install the crank wire in the little guide that they give you. Now I see that this guide just needs to be pinched just a little bit. I don't want that wire falling out because it will hit the cert belt. So I'm going to get a pair of needle nose and see if I can pinch that over. So if you are having trouble like I am, where this harness won't lock into this metal bracket, it's really important that this does not slide out. So I'm just going to use little small plastic ties. And I'm going to make sure it doesn't fall out. I'll just cut the excess. There we go. So now you're going to take the alternator, put it in the position, make sure the harness is over, line that like that. Let's go get the bolts. Top one's the long bolt, put it in the front eyelet, let it find its way through, hand tighten that just to get it start the threads. Then you're going to take the bottom bolt and you're going to line that up. Yep, see, so you leave the alternator loose so that you can wiggle it around, get those threads started. 14 millimeter socket for the top bolt. I'm just going to snug it. Then I'm going to snug the bottom one. That's a 12 millimeter socket. See, it's still a lot of wobble, so let's get back to the top one. Top bolt is 38 foot-pounds. And the bottom bolt to the alternator is 16 foot-pounds. That's a 12 millimeter socket, so that you can put your harness right in right where they want you to. I'm going to pick the furthest spot. There we go. And you can hook your regulator right up, line it up, clicks, take this new nut off, and then see how the grooves on that positive terminal? They fit right in there, just like that. I'm just going to snug that with my hand. Then I'm going to work my way over to the bracket and install the little 6mm bolt. Bring that down, and then I'll just get a socket and ratchet and tighten both those up. 10mm socket, just snug that up. Now as far as the positive cable goes, you literally just want to be gentle as you can. You'll feel it. There it goes. You don't want to be that plastic will crack if you get too ambitious with that. So because this car has some mileage on it, obviously the factory alternator and the plastic cap that was on there to stop anything from grounding out, because that'll blow the system, the cap's missing. So we're going to use some electrical tape. So if yours is missing, I strongly recommend covering it up. You definitely don't want anything getting to this. So I use some oversized 3/8 heat shrink. It's not pretty, but it works. Now nothing's out exposed, so nothing can ground on it. Now I transferred the clip from the other old crank sensor harness, and I'm going to install it right here. You want the clip facing up like that. Then we can take the new harness, slide it down on the groove. See those two grooves in there? They're going to go right on that. So you're going to... Now that's snug on that bracket, we can take the connector and connect the crank sensor. Perfect. So now we're going to run the Serp belt, put it back on. I'm going to run it down below the crank harmonic balancer and the AC. Now I'm going to decompress the tensioner. Best bet is to try to get it over the alternator and slide it back over the water pump. Now before you reassemble the mount and start it up, take a quick look and make sure that all the ridges are lined up on every pulley and they're not one off. Now we're going to reinstall our mount before I lower the engine. Let's see if I can get it in there a little bit easier. Now I'm going to install the hardware. I'm going to put the nut in first. That long bolt is going to go right into that bracket. Everything hand tight first. These are fine threads, so it will cross thread easily. And it's rather important, you don't want it to cross thread. So these inner two bolts, nut and a bolt, is 38 foot-pounds. And then these back ones are 70 foot-pounds. Now we can put this ground strapping on. I'm going to put the top hose on first, and then the bottom hose on. Make sure they go all the way in, flush. And then I'll start my two mounting bolts. One there, one back here. Tighten it down. Reattach your clamps. And the bottom one. I like to line it up the way the grooves, you can see where it was sitting before. I have had them leak if they don't sit exactly where they were. Now we're going to just take the cover off and add coolant to the system. So once your coolant system is completely full, don't forget to run it and let all the air bubbles burp out before you road test your vehicle. Now we can install the upper decorative cover and start from this side, and you can work your way over with the pins. So I'm going to put my two push pins like this, one there and then one here, and then I'll put the rest of my pins in all the way around. Now we can put our inner skirt in the fender well, right in there. Put the top pins in. If you have bottom pins, go ahead and put those in too. Mine were missing. So now these tabs have to go up underneath the bumper cover. Fold them. Go all the way across. And now we can put our bolts back in. Put the front tire back on. Tighten your wheel up, just snug it up. We're snugging it because the wheel torque is only 76 foot-pounds on this RAV. Torque in a star pattern. Double check.